Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at both of the event exclusive banners that are on offer with the launch of 1.0 Star Rail. Now this is an incredibly important topic for free-to-play players, as understanding which banner to go for and which one to allocate your very precious free-to-play resources to is essential to making sure you have a strong and competitive account that's fun playing in the future. So we're going to boil down which banner looks to be objectively the best for free-to-play players going into the release of the game with all the information we have now. Now there's going to be a couple disclaimers here. Number one, this is all based on information from closed beta. Any of the units on this list could get nerfed, and I highly recommend you subscribe to the channel and keeping an eye on my channel on release, as I'm going to be covering which units are buffed and nerfed after the game releases. Number two, we also don't have a full picture of how the endgame of Star Rail is going to play out. There could be massive meta-defining things which are undiscovered. So far, I do think we have a pretty good understanding, but who knows what is down the line and what people discover. And number three, this is of course all just my opinion. At the end of the day, you should pull for who you think is cool and who you really like the style of and potentially are going to enjoy. Don't let my opinion ruin your dreams of a certain character. Okay, so let's try and take as an objective look as possible at these banners and decide which one is best as a free-to-play player. So first up, I'm going to quickly cover these 5 stars because I think that this is the thing which many people focus on, but in my opinion, it's not the one that should be focused on. So first up, we've got the 2 5 stars, Seele and Jing Yuan. So they are both exceptional, top of their classes in single target as well as AoE. Now, let's talk the typings first. So in terms of typing, Seele has the advantage absolutely over Jing Yuan, and in a vacuum, Quantum is far more valuable than Lightning. As a free-to-play player, you are offered a free-to-play option in Serval, as well as an excellent 4-star unit, Eidolons, which can really take the place of that Lightning unit. Now on the flip side of things for Seele, there is no Quantum unit really, which is free to play accessible, which is good. Tingyun in her current state in closed beta 3 is not a character I would personally recommend people building unless they really like the design of the character. She just doesn't fit that easily onto teams, and she is a little bit difficult to use in the end game, which is the Forgotten Hall. So overall, Seele's typing is superior. Damage, they both have pretty good damage for their roles, Jing being AoE and Seele being single target. So overall, pick whichever one you want. I personally think that single target in this game is a little bit more powerful, as you're able to take out priority targets, which will really allow you to, put up a front and then not die after that single target dies. If you think about it, if you have 2 enemies and you take one out, you're taking 50% of the damage. So if you could survive just barely at 100%, it's cruising at 50% of the damage output. So taking out one, in my opinion, is more important than taking out both at the same time. So I would prefer single target. That's just my opinion. Moving on to their future proofing, Jing Yuan essentially just has really big numbers. There's nothing really unique about him. I know he has his Lightning Lord, but that's just another mechanism to deliver damage. Whereas Seele has exceptional damage and also has a unique on-kill reset mechanic, which allows her to move multiple times in a single action if she gets kills, which is exceptionally powerful and really does give her a little bit of stickiness in terms of how good she'll be later on down the road. I could easily see Seele, being in videos and comps in 1.5 years or 2 years down the road, purely from the fact that she does have the capability, when supported correctly, to completely wipe whole sides of the Forgotten Hall by herself if she's able to string together skill, reset, ultimate reset, skill. That kind of a way to go. She's also incredibly fast, which does actually go against her sometimes. She's an incredibly expensive unit to run. We'll get to that in a second here. But overall, I think that Seele is a lot more future-proof in my opinion. Next up, we have team compositions. So Jing Yuan actually wins here. Jing is very, very easy to make team compositions around, and that's because he's actually quite a slow unit. He doesn't consume a whole lot of action points, which is the primary resource that your team is going to use and generate, which is really good. It means he can slot in with pretty much any unit, any support, anything you want to do with him, he's good for it. Seele, on the other hand, though, is incredibly expensive to run. She's very demanding, and she really wants you to build the whole team around her. But that will obviously make her incredibly powerful, but she's a lot less flexible than Jing is. So Jing definitely has a point against her there. And then finally, let's talk a little bit about their Eidolons and rerun potential. So Seele has a lot higher rerun potential in my opinion than Jing. Jing's Eidolon 1, which is basically what you're going to be going for, is basically just more AoE. It doesn't increase his single target at all, which isn't a bad thing, but it's just going to basically double down on the AoE portion, which is, while important, not the main priority in my opinion in the endgame. Seele's is on the other end of things, a massive damage increase for single target. It's exceptional, but it does actually make her even harder to build around. So if you were going to go and, pull an Eidolon, I would definitely pull Seele's Eidolon personally, as I think that it is a lot bigger value than Jing's Eidolon, because it makes her really go up in value in terms of the damage and the kind of priority targeting that she can provide. Final point here, their weapons. If you wanted to go for a weapon on the rerun and you did save pretty much everything to juice this character out, Seele's weapon, in my opinion, is a lot more powerful and generic than Jing's. We'll go over Seele's first. In the night, it essentially is going to give you a crit rating buff, which is good, but then in addition, that's going to give you a pile of stats based off of speed. Now, there's a lot of very fast hunt characters, which is what this light tone is for, and you can also invest into this a little bit further with either speed buffs on the team. Tingyun provides your carry a speed buff, so that'll scale in the night, as well as just equipping speed items to your character. In addition to that, in the future, it's highly possible we get even more characters who can buff speed or sets that buff speed. So overall, I think that this cone is really good in terms of long-term investment when it comes back on the rerun, or if you decide to get really lucky and get it on the first run. Now, Jing Yuan's cone is one which is pretty much just built for him. The only thing which it really offers to characters who do not have follow-up attacks is a big pile of critical strike multiplier, which is pretty damn good, and also, some pretty good damage as well, but it's not anything which is going to break the game in terms of erudition characters. I think that it's a little bit too specific to him. While powerful, I don't think it's as generic as Seele's in the long run. Now, of course, it's still going to be good. It's going to be better than any other option, but it definitely doesn't break the game. All right, so with the 2 5-stars talked about, which one would you choose? Both of them are outstanding. That's basically that. Whichever one you want to go for is probably completely fine. If you're talking like super sweaty, long-term min-maxing, I do think that Seele might, maybe, possibly, in my opinion, have a little bit more value long-term, but Jing is obviously a complete beast. And for full transparency, everyone who played with the Ultra Endgame units did consider Jing more powerful at this stage of the game, just because you can basically like AoE cleave everything down and it'll just die. There was really no need for the single target priority of Seele once you get to a certain priority, kind of like certain damage threshold, I will say. So that's kind of the 5 stars there, and you can take a look at which one you think is better, but overall it is just going to come down to your preference. Probably not what you want to hear, but I think if I had to pick right now which one I wanted, I would pick Seele if I had to pick one of the two, and I could just guarantee get them. All right, that is obviously an opinion though. You should go with which one you like. Let's move on to the most important part though now, and this is what's going to concern the free-to-play players the most. You really shouldn't be worrying about the 5-star as much, in my opinion, as it's very unlikely you're going to have enough resources to guarantee, which is 180 pulls, either of them. You could get lucky, you could get it in 90, which is the 50-50, you could get it way earlier than that. But we're talking about objectively which banner is best, and you cannot objectively say that you'll get either of those. The likely scenario for many people, for half of the people, is going to be that you're going to get a standard banner 5-star as well as a big pile of the 4 stars on the banner. So that's what we're going to talk about next, the 4 stars on the banner, because this is really what is going to dictate how powerful and how many options you have on your account in the early days of the game, especially in the Forgotten Hall. All right, so Seele's banner. Who does she have alongside her on her banner? Let's take a look here. Natasha, Pela, and Hook is on her banner here. So first of all, we'll take a look at Natasha. She is a unit you already gain access to as a free-to-play player as part of the story. So basically, when you pull Natasha, you're going to be pulling an Eidolon for her, which is essentially going to give her a little bit extra power. Now, the question then becomes, how good is that Eidolon? Well, I actually got a chance to play with Natasha's Eidolons on closed beta, and at least there, they were a little bit underwhelming. Quite underwhelming, I would say. Definitely not worth having that, in my opinion, instead of another character. I'd much rather have another character like Pela or Hook than an Eidolon and Natasha, despite her being the primary healer that is going to be on your account. It really does boil down to the fact that it doesn't give you any consistent increase in power to the character. It's essentially when she gets on low life, she's going to heal back in the nick of time, as long as she doesn't die, which can save you in some scenarios, but it's definitely not going to be a defining portion of the character or change the way the character is played. So overall, if you pulled Natasha as part of the Seele banner, even all the way up to Eidolon 2, I would be a little disappointed myself, so that's really not going to be a very big point in Seele's banner's favor here, as I believe this would be a wasted pull for the most part if you got Natasha. All right, next up, Hook. Hook is a decent unit. She's basically the definition of an average unit. You know, your typical B+ unit here. A really good unit to have early on in progression here, because you really don't get too much access to single target, really strong units in the very early game. You know, you get Dan Hang, okay, you know, that's pretty much it. You could get Ireland from the shop, you know, he's a pretty good option as well. But in terms of single target, you don't really have any good go-tos in terms of the early game. And Hook is a pretty good single target unit. She's also a fire single target unit, which there is a lot of enemies who are vulnerable to that in the early game. Really tough enemies as well. So she's definitely going to make your time a lot easier in the early game of your progression. In addition to that, a big priority, at least in the beta, was building units with break effect. Essentially, you get the toughness bar really low on the enemy, and then you break them with your break effect carry, and you deal massive damage with that character. And Hook was actually incredibly good at that. Hook is also a burn applier, like they can apply the burn debuff, which is quite synergistic with some other characters, like Himiko, Pela, and a few others. So that is pretty nice, but she also does already have competition with that in a unit you already get, Asta. Asta is a support who also applies the burn debuff. So Hook doesn't really get much value from that either. So overall, I would say that she is pretty much the definition of average. In the short term, she's going to be fantastic. You're probably going to level up, you're probably going to love her, but in the long term, I imagine this is a unit which is going to be very quickly power crept by a lot of other options, even other 4 stars. I imagine there's probably going to be a lot more priorities that you're going to be having long term. So in terms of the long term that we're looking at here, not the best unit to get, in my opinion. All right, Pela. Let's take a look at Pela. So Pela is an outstanding unit. For you guys don't know, in many of the most endgame compositions here in Star Rail that we've seen so far, namely coming out of China because they had the gacha mechanic, most teams, at least in the endgame over there, consist of the following: 1 damaging unit, 1 sub DPS or additional support unit, and then 2 more support units on top of that. So you get 1 DPS and 3 supports. That's just generally kind of how it plays out right now with our current understanding of the game in the ultra endgame. And Pela is a support here. She is also a very good support. She gives you resist and defense penetration, which is a really good stat. And it's actually a stat which is not subject to diminishing returns, which is really good. The more defense penetration you get, the more it gives you in terms of value, which is outstanding. It means that when other units down the line, like Silver Wolf, come out, they actually pair synergistically together instead of going against each other. And that's really going to be quite powerful. So Pela is an excellent unit to get, and her Eidolons are phenomenal as well. All the way up to Eidolon 6, you are getting value from Pela. So I think that Pela is a really good unit, and I would absolutely love to pull her if I could at the start of the game. So really good there. She's going to be able to play as a full support role, which basically you can just basic attack with her. She's going to bring that ultimate when you really need the damage, or you can play her as a carry, in fact, with all of the focus on her. Her ultimate has a mechanic in which she actually gains energy back whenever she hits an enemy with it, and you can also pretty much like make her a guaranteed sweeper and power farmer with her ultimate. If you really heavily invest in her, she is probably one of the best AoE farmers in the game. I highly recommend checking out Pela's abilities. She's really impressive. So overall, Pela, great unit. So what do we got here? We got 2 units. Well, 1 unit which you really don't want to pull, Hook, which is okay to pull, going to be good in the early game, and Pela, who is a really good unit to pull and you'd love to see. So you've kind of got a pretty mixed bag here right now on Seele's banner. So what does Jing have at his disposal? Well, it's going to be pretty hard to compete with. All right, let's cover the first unit which you get as a free-to-play player here, which is March. Similar to Natasha, you will get March as part of the story, so you're going to be pulling for that Eidolon again. Now the difference here with March is that her Eidolons are phenomenal. They are really good. So when you're in the early game of the progression, you're only going to have 1 healer, which is completely fine for simulated universe as well as progression throughout the story. But when you get to the Forgotten Hall, the ultra endgame of Star Rail, you're going to be asked to construct 2 teams, not 1. And most teams need a healer or some way to sustain the team. And you're only given 1 as a free-to-play player. But you are also given 2 shielders, and it's going to take both of them on the other team to match up to that healer which you have on the first team. And March is one of those 2 shielders. Now, the cool thing about March is that she also offers insane crowd control with her ultimate, which freezes enemies. If you build her correctly, you can pretty consistently freeze enemies at the right time to really help you get through those later stages of the Forgotten Hall. And she's probably going to be on your team quite a lot due to that fact. Now, March's Eidolons help her with this quite a lot. The first Eidolon gives her increased increased energy regeneration essentially, and the second Eidolon will give her energy back whenever she freezes enemies with her ultimate. So overall, getting those Eidolons on her is a really big deal, and it's going to allow you to freeze enemies a lot more consistently in the Forgotten Hall, which will increase that survivability of that much needed second team. So March is great. Long term, I do expect that she's probably going to fall off in power and relevance pretty quickly right after you get that second healer. But overall, she's still a pretty good unit to have. And if enemies are ever vulnerable to freeze, you can probably cheese quite a lot of endgame scenarios with her, even when she does get power crept by getting that second healer. So yeah, overall pretty good. And she is going to be a pretty excellent support in the event they ever release a shielder who can act in place of a healer. She will turn into a substantially more powerful unit in that case. So pretty cool, very good unit, very strong with Eidolons. Next up, Sushang. Sushang is one of the best 4-star free-to-play options which you can get your hands on in terms of a main damage character. We've talked about Seele. She's essentially a budget Seele, maybe not quite as high potential or damage, but she definitely does play very similarly. If you don't get Yang Qing, you don't get Seele, Sushang is kind of going to be your substitute there. She can do a ton of damage, and she is quite effective at doing so, and she only has one real downside, and that is that she's incredibly hungry for skill points, meaning you'll have to play her in a similar fashion to Seele. This gets a little bit better when you get her Eidolon 1, however she is still going to be a little bit expensive to run, especially against teams who are not vulnerable to physical. If you want more information on that, I'll probably do a video on her, or you can check out her abilities yourself. But overall, Sushang does have a big carry potential and is accessible by players who are playing free to play. You're definitely going to want her on your team, and in addition to that, she's also excellent in the early game. She is great as a breaker. As we mentioned with Hook, you're going to want to be building that break effect early, and you're going to be slapping that on Sushang there, as she does do physical damage, and physical is the strongest break effect in terms of damage, and she also performs earlier, as we mentioned, a ton of actions, which does make her expensive, but it also makes her an outstanding breaker as well. So overall, Sushang, excellent carry, really, really good for free-to-play players to get their hands on this one, and highly recommend. Next up, I had a whole video on this character, Tingyun. She is phenomenal, an absolute beast of a support. Basically a character that every free-to-play player is going to want to get, and pretty much a character for the foreseeable future which you should expect to have on your Forgotten Hall roster on one side or the other. The only problem and downside with this unit is that you can't run her on both sides of the Forgotten Hall. She's just that strong. Overall, she can be played in literally any team composition, and she actually fixes a bunch of team compositions as well. So I can't really praise this unit enough, and her Eidolons only make her even stronger. So even if you were to pull 2-3 copies of her, you would still be ecstatic. And overall, she is just an absolute S tier unit in terms of a 4-star. So really strong. It's essentially like having a Bronya level unit on your account with how she was balanced in closed beta 3. Definitely a high likelihood that she will be nerfed, but we'll cover that when it happens. But very good here, and an absolutely OP unit in my opinion. All right, so let's do a bit of a review here. Let's talk a little bit about it. So we've obviously already noticed here that both of the 5 stars are very strong. They're really good. We've talked about their ups and downs. You know, they each have their pros and cons. If you were to ask my opinion, which one I would prefer to have, it'd be Seele. But then when you get into their banners, it's a pretty clear-cut story that Jing Yuan's banner is far superior in terms of all of the 4 stars on it. It gives you a much needed defensive unit and enhances their power to a point where it's going to be easier for you in the end game. It gives you one of the best supports in the game, Tingyun. She is ridiculous, and then it also gives you one of the best carries if you don't get Yang Qing, if you don't get Seele, that you're going to have on your free-to-play account, at least from what we've seen so far. So overall, I would say that Jing Yuan's banner is basically a no-brainer as a free-to-play player. You know, Seele's isn't terrible. If you do pull it though, and you do not get her, and you did not get Pela, you're going to feel pretty bad. I know I would be. But on Jing Yuan, there's basically no bad scenario. Even if you pull the standard banner character, you're still getting all those 4 stars, which is really going to help you in the end game based on the way the game is balanced right now. But as a final thought, as always guys, make sure you pull the banner which you think is coolest. If you just really gotta have that Seele, go for it. You know, get it. That's what you gotta go for. She's got really good scaling, really good potential. But if you want to get competitive, it's probably gonna be Jing. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you learned something new, make sure to subscribe for more. And until next time, cheers.